So yeah, thanks everyone. It is episode 9, and it's a quick escalation of where we've got to since episode 1. On this episode, I wanted to talk about hybrid working, and I know that this is a topic of conversation for many and something that I'm involved with. So on this episode of the podcast, I've got a former colleague of mine and someone who I know very well in the industry, who is a peer and an expert in this kind of thing. So welcome on to the Delivery Manager Daily, Ian Fisher. Thank you, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi Mario, good to meet you again. Yeah, it's been we chat regularly, but it's been a while since we've actually delivered something together. I'm Ian Fisher, so I'm a director of a consulting firm, and I'm the global future of work lead. So I've published a number of ebooks out there. It's called the 90 Days series. If you put Ian Fisher and the future of work into Google, you'll see all you need to see. So I think I'm the top 10 hits. But in terms of the pre-pandemic, I worked on the future of work anyway, because it was there, but it's just accelerated it with the pandemic. And now, it's a negative thing, but it's also become a good carrot. So lots of change. So
one of the challenges that I see, certainly for the organizations that I work for or consult for, is what's it going to look like? Because the practical reality of the hybrid working model is going to be really difficult, right? What kind of problems do you see for a company encouraging people to get back to work, and maybe the staff that don't want to come back because they've got quite a good gig now, working from home, no expenses? Yeah. So what kind of challenges are you seeing?
Well, we're not going to get through this in 20 minutes if that's the question. That's the behemoth. I think I'd rather solve world hunger than try and solve that. But the main ones are mismatch of expectations. And what do I mean by that? Management expecting one thing, employees expecting another. There are a whole host of logistical challenges. There are a whole host of regulatory and legal challenges that you're going to have to overcome. And then there's a host of people challenges too about how we actually work. So if you break it down, most people want to return to an office somewhere between 1 and 3 days per week. Right? Usually, I forget the source, but there was a nice graphic that was published. I think it might have been actually on Bloomberg, where they showed of all the typical work things that you would do, there's only 3 things you really need to do in an office. One is to meet other people, to socialize. One is to effectively deliver something. And the third thing is to have training or upskill. That's better done face-to-face usually. The rest are all typically, most people say, better done remotely. However, when the first thing that they mentioned was the meeting people socially. That's one of the biggest issues we've been seeing in terms of remote work. So how do you keep an office which costs money just to have people to come back and socialize? And the other thing is, you've now got to, when I come to the mismatch of expectations, the second thing is management expect employees to come back a certain amount of time because they're paying for an office. Most of them are leased, right? You've got in some cases 4, 5, 6 year leases, and therefore that's sunk cost. So you need people to come back and use that. So what do you use the office for? Well, I want to come back to the office 1 day a week. That's great, but you want to come back another day a week. What's the point? You're going to an office to sit and do email, and you're not really going to meet your objective because you're not going to socialize. So the key thing is really to understand what people want. And the main thing that we've just launched is, we've done a number of them, but the biggest one we're doing now is about 5,500 people. We're serving to understand how they want to work in the future of work. And it's
you're doing that with a survey.
Yeah, well, we're doing that with a client right now. We've utilized our future work survey that we built. Right. And we've launched it to 2 different groups, which we're then splicing into functional areas. And we're helping the organization understand the differences, because expectation mismatch is one of the key things. And they're fully open to redesigning the way they want to work. Other organizations we're working with have given us a diktat that, we expect everyone back in the office a minimum of 50% of the month. Or in another organization, everyone's coming back to the office and will have to apply on a case-by-case basis to work at home. Can you imagine the paperwork that management are going to have to go through to do that?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's something I talk about. I mean, you've also got, I guess, the workforce that you're going to have a genuine group of people that are going to try and do a hybrid working model. But then you've got a bunch of staff that have thought, hold on a minute, I don't have to spend anything on a commute now. I'm quite comfortable at home. I've spent 10 grand on gadgets and kit in my home. the nature of my work's changed, where going back to an office, it's like it doesn't feel right. So they're going to game the situation for their advantage. How do you think companies, when you've got 800 employees that not only don't want to come back to work, start to say, oh, well, I'm uncomfortable because of COVID? What do you think the strategy is going to be to kind of combat that?
So that's only going to have legs for so long, right? And I'm not getting into any of the conspiracies about COVID and
FYI for the listeners, Ian's got a very specific opinion on COVID, and I think he's done a couple of talks about it on his YouTube channel, so I'll make sure that they're included in the link.
Let me just be clear. COVID is a real thing. COVID is. I've had my.
I didn't say you're a conspiracy theorist.
my best man at my wedding was in a 90-day coma due to clinic, so due to COVID. So trust me, it's a real thing, right? My problem is the way it's being dealt with, and the fact that it's a three-part process. Very briefly, you've kind of got input, which is people coming in and out of the country. You've got a box, which is the country, and then you've got output, which is people leaving or moving around. And unfortunately, they haven't shut the box, so people still come in. So you get fresh virus coming in, which is a variant and everything else. You also get mutations in the box in the country. But like Australia, as one of my YouTube videos shows, they shut the doors, and they've pretty much been clear since the start of the pandemic. I think New Zealand's had 1,200 cases or something. I'll get the number wrong, but since the start of the pandemic, I think it's like 18 deaths, ridiculously low. So there are lessons to be learned. But anyway, to answer your question, the COVID situation will maintain, but is it going to be the new millennium bug, where everyone has to start prepping offices and practicing this and having, we've been asked around COVID tracking apps for facilities management because of the risk-based algorithms around, think about contracts. What happens if you walk into one of your clients' offices with COVID and take out the entire office? That's a commercial risk that you have to think about. So there is a real thing here that we need to look at, but it's probably not top of mind, because if you think about the transition, everyone worked at home usually on a Monday or a Friday, usually a Friday before the pandemic. You had a laptop, you had broadband, it was all working. We just escalated that into 5 days a week, and it all still worked. The problem is that the processes people used and worked with, and the way where they worked wasn't suited to long-term working, and therefore some companies struggled. 25% of organizations in the UK had to pause or stop trading completely in the pandemic. And therefore how you get back to work is not the same way. There has to be a fundamental reset. It's not the same way as you went back to work and evolved before the pandemic. So what do I mean by that? I mean, your customer base has changed. The way people consume services and products has now moved much more digital. Therefore, your old ways of working may not work. So you can't just go back to what you want. Now, layer the people on top of that. You're always going to have the people who want to work. You're going to have the people who maybe want to work at home, and I'm working at home. And then you're going to have people in some organizations who generally take the mick, and this is going to be the difference. So there's really...
Do you think that situation gives those people that take the mick a bigger opportunity to take the mick over a longer period? Or do you actually just think, COVID aside, at some point, employers are going to be like, come on, back to the office. Your contract was you're in the office. And I know you can't broad brush that across every industry and every type of work. But for us management consultants that are used to getting on planes and traveling, and now all of a sudden we've had this kind of cushy being at home for 12 months. Is it an opportunity for people to swing the lead a bit?
Well, so speak for yourself. So if I just sort of give you a personal example. So I, as you know, I live up near Edinburgh now, right? Since I moved.
In the middle of nowhere, yeah.
In the middle of nowhere, yeah. So we got electricity last week. So I used to have to add 3 hours of travel anywhere I went. So when we worked in London or we worked abroad, I always had to connect. And therefore, I usually got up at 4 on a Monday to get the 6 o'clock flight to Heathrow, connect, and then travel somewhere else, right? That's now obviously not getting up at 4. I'm getting up later, but now the day starts earlier because it's full of meetings, and the day finishes later. And the reason it finishes later is you now have a global workforce. So one of the key benefits of COVID from a workforce perspective is talent is no longer regional. You've got people, even if you looked on LinkedIn, for instance, you can see there are a lot more people recruiting remote jobs. So you don't have to hire people in your local area or say you have to relocate. I've got people I know of in organizations I'm working with who are based in Newcastle who now work in London. And that would never have happened before because you would have had to commute.
So
and that's really a remote job.
I was going to say, is there an expectation mismanagement now? So all that time, so for people listening, I used to work with Ian, and what, as Ian said, he lives at like the arse end of the UK, and he was always on planes and trains, and that's a lot of lost productivity. And now you've not been doing that, assuming that you've been working in that time. What happens when we, in quotes, we go back to normal, and all of a sudden you're back on an EasyJet traveling across? Traveling across the UK for 3 hours and delays.
I challenge that.
And clients are like, no, come on, you've been working until 11 o'clock at night. Why can't you do it now? How do you think they're going to manage that?
So I would challenge that personally, because I don't see, I think consulting specifically in business has now realized the actual true cost of doing business. So from an expenses point of view. So
Yeah.
you think the average consultant traveling probably expenses somewhere between 800 and 1500 a week in terms of, depending on the trip and the travel. That's a hell of a saving when you think about it for every project. So if the bottom line, your non-recoverable expense has suddenly shot up, that's bottom line recovery. So I don't see it going back to probably more than 20-30% of that type of work. The reason being is business has successfully delivered in many areas with no downsides whatsoever. Yeah, the human side may have suffered slightly because of burnout and extra workload and all that kind of stuff, but the actual physical delivery hasn't really changed. And you can still go to an office should you need to deliver training or face-to-face or meet people. So I think it's going to be much more blended in the hybrid environment, and it will really be much more justified as to why you have to go somewhere. So it used to be, if you remember, in large corporates where they used to do expense clampdowns, and they were saying, we want you to try and look at a meeting, but try and look at video conferencing or other options first, and then that would justify the travel. Right? I used to work in a very large one where that happened. Now it then moved to your client needs you go to where you need to go to. That isn't going to happen in the future. You just can't afford it. So I don't think, industry-wise, aviation, hotels are going to go back to the same way, because it's the space usage is going to change. They're not going to have the same number of bed nights. They're not going to have the same number of mileage, trips in the air, and that is unfortunately the future, the future work. If you look at, if you think this is going back anytime soon, by the way, again, this is not conspiracy theory. The government is, and in Scotland, it was on the news last night. They are looking at a paper on what they're calling the actual new normal. So they're expecting some form of restrictions to continue for years down the line. Because when you go back to level 0, which in Scotland is no restrictions, you would assume that means no restrictions, but not according to the papers in the news yesterday. No restriction means no restrictions light. And Boris Johnson is looking at the same thing in England. So there is still going to be, given the emergency powers runs out, I think in 2022 now, they're just voting on it in Parliament. So it's September 2022 is when they're expecting coronavirus powers to run out. So this is not going away for a considerable time, whether COVID's around or not.
Interesting. And what about technology? So how many companies are you working for? What are you seeing in the industry? And obviously, there's a lot of people that didn't use video conferencing tools as much as they have now, but any areas of industry that you think aren't ready for this new normal with the technology that they've got, or any technology problems that you see?
So obviously Teams is huge. I think it was between Zoom and Teams. Zoom saw something like 200 million minutes in the first month.
It was crazy. Yeah, they're great.
But Teams has exploded. Everyone's now on Teams. Everything's social. The technology has vastly improved over what we had before. It's not new, it's accelerated, right? So from a Teams perspective, you can now share documents, you can chat like this, you can collaborate, you can do lots of things. What it doesn't really do is it's not great, going back to those 3 things again, it's not great for proper workshops, it's not great for capturing. You have to bring in lots of lots of different technology. So for instance, Miro or whatever else is not connected to Teams. You have to go to a different technology.
And you lose the water cooler moment as well, right? You lose that opportunity to
this is the other bit. So the technology wise is fine from a point of view of its internal, but the minute you start trying to work externally, You've then got spans of control and different different environments to deal with. So the companies I'm working with, they cannot connect to some of their customers because they use a different thing, and therefore trying to whiteboard with someone who's not in your instance of Teams is impossible. You have to be in the same instance. The same goes for socialization and water coolers. So low tech, high sort of high touch in terms of personalization. People miss the water cooler. And interestingly, in one of the surveys I'm doing now, so there's a bit of buyer's remorse. So some of them went back to an office and they were in a key worker area to have meetings. And they went, you know what, it wasn't all it was cracked up to be. I enjoyed seeing them, but having to travel for a 2-hour meeting to then just have that moment, they've kind of done it now and they're over it. So there is that, not fear of the unknown, but fear of the back to what was known. So I think once they've done it, they'll realize actually what is important. And for me, it's about people being able to choose what they want to do, because there is now no excuse. When you look at effectively, it is the employed gig economy where people have the ability to do what they want to do, and business has no reason not to trust them if they have the right management things in place. B, if it's outcome focused, they can track it and people can deliver. And we're all adults. We should just be treated, to deliver it. There will always be the Mickey takers, and you have processes to deal with that. But business has worked for 15 months. There's no reason to backtrack right now. But there are some, and this is where it comes for me down to choice. There are some who have said to me, I used to enjoy going on the train. I used to enjoy switching off. I used to enjoy sitting on a plane because yes, I could still work, but no one could contact me. So I could have dedicated work.
You like the expensive champagne and the flight attendants, right?
We didn't work for that company, no. Yeah, no. Unfortunately, that wasn't the well. I was always driving the other end, so that's a clear no. But no, it was nice just to sit on the plane, whether you were squished in the back or you were up front, didn't matter. But you had a little table to work on, and you could just sleep or switch off or work or do what you wanted. But you then also, whilst most people I had to stand in a queue for a plane, that was switch off time. Your brain just switched off. That is the biggest thing right now that most people are reporting, is the inability to switch off. So you're going from a call to a call to a call to a call. That's mentally not good.
Yeah, that fatigue we see all the time. Zoom fatigue's a thing, but you find people have just
Can you imagine being a company that's attributed to that phrase, Zoom fatigue? Well, how bad a customer experience is that, or a brand experience? Yeah.
Well, it's a bit like Corona, right?
They dropped $130 million in sales just because of the brand name Corona. In fact, there was a meme. Where I can't remember if it was them. It was on Instagram, where somebody put a bottle of Corona, and they had basically 3 bottles of Corona that were marching to the left, and they had rebranded Corona with the word Ebola and went, "This is safer."
Oh no!
That was the thing. So it's a kind of self-flagellation, but or self-pity. But that is the kind of thing that people associate with Corona beer. Nothing to do with it, but it lost $130 million.
So tell us what you're working on at the minute. What do you want to plug? What is Ian doing? Where can people find you if they want to? There's loads to talk about in the very short time we've got.
Yeah, it's what's keeping me busy. Like I said, it's longer than 20 minutes. Like I said, the thing, if everyone's interested in this, the key thing to go and read the books, right? So there's 3 of them at the moment. 4th one's being published. If you put Ian Fisher and 90 Days Later into Google, you'll get the ISG 90 Days series popping up. They're 30 to 50 pages long. It explains the pandemic, it explains the financials, it explains the back to work.
And I have read that. It's really good, actually, I must say.
That's a labor of love, and it's they are I won't say sponsor because they're not sponsored. That's not true. But as part of my work, I'm scanning the market to see which providers are doing good stuff. And when I find something that I will badge as unique, because I have turned people away, we write about it and we kind of wire it in, because it's worth knowing what's going on. So the latest one around people and digital interaction, which we've just been talking about, the hybrid workforce, has augmentation of AI and virtual assistants. It has productivity tools, back to work, generational differences. It's a really good read. So I'm not going to plug a service. It's just go read the book. It's free.
Nice. Ian, it has been an absolute pleasure to talk to you, and I'm very grateful to have you on for episode 9. So Thank you very much for your time, and for those listening, obviously you can watch this on YouTube and get to see Ian as well, and you can listen on all your favourite podcast software as well. Thanks for listening. Don't forget you can follow me on Twitter at MarioDC, and look forward to talking to you again on the Delivery Manager Daily for episode 10. Thank you. Thanks, Ian.